Welcome back. This is John Knight from the University Skills Academy, and we're going to continue with our time management. So today's chat is about exactly how much time we have and how we spend that time. So looking at the spreadsheet in front of me, and this is something I want you to do once you've completed this video, either with a scratch pad or an Excel sheet or whatever you do your maths with. Let's just see what we have. So everyone has 24 hours in the day to start with. So before you take anything away, you're left with 24 hours. And that means there's 168 hours in a week. If we sleep for 8 hours a day, that means we're left with 16 hours per day after sleep and 112 hours per week. If you have to travel an hour each way to and from where you're studying, okay, there's 2 hours a day in traveling, and we have 14 hours left, or 98 hours per week left over. If you spend 20 minutes at each meal, 3 meals a day, then you're losing an hour a day to eating. You're down to 13 hours a day, or 91 hours per week. Hygiene, stuff like showering, washing your clothes, ironing your clothes, doing a bit of housework, whatever. An hour a day, you're down to 12 hours per day, or 84 hours per week. Now, roughly, this is just a round number, because strictly speaking it should be 0.6, but it's just a bit awkward to talk about. If you do half an hour of exercise per day, you're then down to 11.5 hours a day, or 80.5 hours per week. So at the end of the day, just by living and traveling and doing all the stuff that you need to do, you're down to 11.5 hours a day, or 81 hours per week. Introduce something like a full-time job or full-time study at 8 hours a day. You are now left with 3.5 hours per day to anything else above and beyond life in general, because life costs us 11.5 hours a day, study or a job, and let's face it, they're the same thing, because you've got to treat your study like a full-time job. You're left with 3.5 hours to do other things, or 25 hours a week. Now, 3.5 hours mightn't sound much, but 25 hours a week is quite a bit. So in summary, life consumes 12.5 hours a day, or 88 hours per week. Study consumes 8 hours a day, or if you're working, this is if you're working a 7-day week, 56 hours a week. Time left after life and study is 3.5 hours a day, or 24.5 hours a week. Right. That's actually quite a bit of time if you've got more than a whole day. Now, what does this work when we are actually applying this to a genuine study scenario? So say you want to work 5 days a week. It seems reasonable. 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. Life costs you 88 hours. Life and study cost you, therefore, 128 hours. You're left with 40 hours per week, or 5.7 hours per day. Now, that's quite a bit. 40 hours a week, admittedly, the bulk of that would be Saturday, Sunday. There's still quite a bit of time there. You can do a lot in 40 hours. If you're really going to push hard and work 7 days a week, though I wouldn't recommend it, your study is going to cost you 56 hours. Right? Life is still going to cost you 88 hours per week. So life and study costs you 144 hours a week. You're left with 25 hours a week. That's 3.5 hours a day. Again, there's still a lot you can do with that. Yeah, a tidy marathon runner can knock out a marathon there in 3.5 hours. Now, a few things to consider here. A lot of institutions nowadays say that full-time study should be 10 hours per subject. Full-time study requires about 4 subjects, so that's 40 hours a week. So 10 hours per subject, 4 subjects, studies 40 hours. Okay, it all matches up with what we're looking at here. Right, so you're left with a little bit over about 6 hours a day, or 41 hours a week. Now, another way to look at it is let's just explain the 10 hours. If you have 4 hours contact time per week in a class, and you're applying the 10-hour rule, it means outside of class, you are expected to spend another 6 quality hours in that subject. So that will include things like preparing for lectures, reviewing lectures, writing up your lecture notes, answering tutorial questions, prepping for assignments, answering assignment stuff. Those sorts of things will be consumed by those 6 hours. All right, there's another way to look at it. Some places say that rather than 10 hours per week per subject, that for every hour of contact, you need to be doing an extra 3 hours non-contact work. So if you have 4 hours per subject and 4 subjects, in total you're looking at 64 hours a week. So if life costs 88 hours and you're working in your study for 64 hours, that's 152 hours a week already spent. It leaves you 2 hours a day. That's a reasonable amount. That's a reasonable amount. In fact, I dare say, because those numbers don't add up, so just under 2.5 hours. That's why you get your 17 hours. Back in ancient times when I was having my first attempt at university, I had to write my lecture notes on a wet clay tablet and a sharpened stick. They were advising us, that's the academic powers of B, that we should be doing 4 hours for every hour of contact, and we had in excess of 16 hours contact. So in round figures, right, say we had 16 hours only, that's an 80-hour week, including class time. If life was costing 88 hours, in fact it didn't, because we were stationed in a place where you could walk to work. It wasn't an hour's commute. So there was an hour and 40 per day saved. On these numbers, we were spending 160 hours a week, leaving us 0.07 a day, a half an hour a week. I would suggest to you that that is not sustainable. From here, what I would like you to do is to go through this exercise and write it out yourself. Let me just give you one other thing. Given that this is almost unsustainable, what if I just did the bad thing and took away 1 hour's worth of sleep a day? Well, all of a sudden, I've got a working day left over at the end of my week, haven't I? That starts to become almost worth consideration if you really had to work hard to get through some things. But again, I wouldn't recommend it. But look at this. On the 3-hour rule, you've got a whole day left over. On the 10-hour rule, you've got 2 whole days left over at the end of the week just for whatever. Sound like there might be room for a part-time job or a sport or a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. Worth considering. Please go and do this exercise in your own time and have that exercise done before you look at the next video. Thank you for your time. This has been John from the University Skills Academy, and we'll see you in the next class.